Hi, my wonderful weedlings. This is Beyond Authentic, where we go beyond the mundane to tell you all about authentic witchcraft. My name's Lisa, and today's video is the start of something that I think is going to be absolutely amazing on this channel. This is a brand new podcast. You know that if you've clicked on the title of it. This is the first ever episode. We're calling it episode 0 because this is the first one. And what is it? It's Witchy Wednesday with. So obviously with a podcast called Witchy Wednesday with, I'm not going to be doing that on my own, am I? No, absolutely not. So then I want you all to welcome my amazing co-host. This is the one and only Neel. Yay!
Hello.
Hello. So then, some of you may well have heard the name Neel floated around on some of my broadcasts and live streams and all sorts in the past. This is that Neel. Neel, introduce yourself.
I'm Lisa's oldest friend, Neel. You've probably heard my name quite a bit on the live streams. You know, Lisa's saying lots of these lovely things about me. And, well, I think it's time for me to disappoint you all.
It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. Neel is the reason that we're doing this podcast is because Neel is a hugely fascinating person. And we've been talking, as I've kind of done more witchy content on the channel, we've been talking more and more about our different kind of practices and how we do things. And there's been lots of discussions that we've had kind of behind the scenes where I've gone, oh, I do this. And then you've gone, oh, I do this, and it's kind of vaguely similar. And I go, oh, but did you do that? And you go, oh yeah, I do that. And so we've had these weird and wonderful like Instagram posts, these long threads of discussions where we're like, oh, I've got to tell you this as well. Oh, you do that. And then it's just kind of evolved into this podcast idea of, well, actually, we can't be the only people that think like this. And so hence the podcast. So everybody, if you are interested in learning about not just our personal takes on the craft, but also kind of bits about our magical histories, things like that, then this is where you want to be each and every Wednesday. No, not each and every Wednesday. On the last Wednesday. This is going well. I'm keeping all of this bit in. This is going to be broadcast on the last Wednesday of every month. Now, as we're filming that, the last Wednesday of every month is literally in 2.5 hours time. So it is Tuesday evening as we're filming this, nothing like lastminute.com. But anyway, this is going to be a monthly podcast, and we're going to talk about all sorts of different subjects from our own viewpoint. Sometimes it'll be things that we've really got like a bee in our bonnet about that we've seen online. Sometimes it could be anything. It could be subjects that you bring to the table. So if there's something that you want us to talk about, put it down in the comment section. But I guess, Neel, the first thing that we need to sort of establish really is our own sort of witchy history. So in a recent video, I talked about labels and how we don't need labels in the craft, because when I started off, I didn't have a label. And then in the same breath, I go on to say, but of course, I'm a eclectic hedge witch in the British tradition, which was just like, as I was editing, I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave that in because it does sum up everything I feel about the craft. So I guess for those of you watching that haven't met Neel before, Neel, what is your craft like? Are you a witch? Are you a magician? Are you a wizard of the third druidic holy order? You know, I don't know. How would you define your sort of magical practice?
Well, I'm a chaos magician with magician with a K, because it's quite cool. I mean, I'm okay with being called a witch. That's fine by me, but I do prefer magician. But yeah, I'm a chaos magician solely. Yeah.
We're going to leave that hanging. So if you don't know what a chaos magician is, or if you don't know what chaos magic is, we're going to leave it hanging for now, for this episode. We will delve into in future episodes what chaos magic is, what it kind of means in a lot more detail. And obviously, as we talk about various subjects, a lot of that will become really obvious as well, because we're going to be talking about how we do things. But I guess just as a little bit of a tease for that, if you had to sum it up, your elevator pitch, you know, your lift pitch, okay. If you had literally between 2 floors, somebody said, oh, well, I don't know what that is. What's that then? How would you elevator pitch it?
So chaos magic is a fairly modern practice. It's very experimental. It's very pick and mix, punk rock version of magic. It's quite experimental. It has an agnostic baseline. So the tagline of it is nothing is true, everything is permitted. So basically, you take anything from any tradition, could be Thelema, could be Norse, could be whatever, and you try it because you're just trying to get results. So all it is about results. Um, if something doesn't work, you drop it. If something keeps working, why not? Keep going with it. But the good thing about it is that because it's so experimental and because you're kind of taking from all these different things, if you kind of strip down all those paths to kind of the bare bones, then say, for instance, right, if you're going to do a ritual for justice, and you could go and work with Tyr from Norse, you could go with Thelmis from Greek, so on and so on. And if you strip those back, then you realize, well, that's kind of like Batman, isn't it? So why don't I work with Batman? Why not?
Okay.
So, and then you build up a system to work with Batman. So, you go with that. And that's kind of the same sort of thing, is that, you can go down, you can pick Thelema, whatever. But you could make up your own magical systems. So you could make one based on Discworld, or you can make one on Marvel, or you can make one on Magic Roundabout or something. And in that moment, you have to fully believe in what you're doing, because, like I said, it's an agnostic baseline. So all you do is you really invest in what you're doing to get results. And if Magic Roundabout doesn't work, then go on to the next thing, or that kind of thing. But what I like to think of it, kind of what it's like, is when you're in the playground, you're a kid, and you're like, oh, let's all play Thundercats, right? You can be so-and-so, you can be so-and-so. We'll use your bag as a shield. We'll use this ruler as a sword. And in that moment, you're so empowered by the idea of being Thundercats, and you're throwing yourself off the climbing frame and, beating each other up, and you fully believe in it. And then as soon as the bell goes, you drop everything and you go to class, and you don't think about it. And your ruler that was a sword is now a ruler. And that's what I like about chaos magic. It's kind of like that. It's kind of it's just fun. You're just kind of playing around with all these different systems and seeing what kind of sticks. If
That's a
that makes
really,
any
really
sense.
no, that's a really
Yeah.
fantastic way of summing it up, actually. Because again, no, you see, before we even get into it, before I even talk about my own kind of labels and what that means, this is the sort of thing that's just sparked to me, because to me that just sounds like Jungian archetypes, which is a psychological theory, and basically saying that in every, and again, if you're looking at any theological pantheon, any sort of form of the deities, you'll find that there are correspondences between them, which is why the Greek and the Romans are so kind of obviously intertwined, because when the Romans took over Greece, they basically renamed and rebranded their gods. Now that I find that fascinating. But if you go further back in every culture, there is always the archetypal hero figure, the archetypal kind of, you talked about Batman is an archetypal anti-hero.
Definitely.
The person who lives and works in the darkness but gets the things done that the good guys can't do. And so that in itself, to me, like, that makes perfect sense. And it's really interesting, because it kind of touches on a little bit of my own approach to the craft, which is, the first word in my label is eclectic, because it is literally a bit of this, a bit of that. And it's kind of like, how, like, depending on how old everybody is listening and watching this, it's either your grandparents or your great-grandparents who would probably not have a recipe book, and they wouldn't have every ingredient available like we do now in the supermarket. So they would just use a bit of this and a bit of that and kind of see what happens. And they go, oh, that's a bit bland, add a bit more of that in. Oh, that's a bit too much, add a bit of that. Oh, that's taking it down a bit. And they do it all by experience. And then they write that down, and that becomes grandma's fruitcake recipe, or like, great Uncle Bob's curry recipe that he got when he was serving in the Indian War, or whatever it is. And you get those things, and they then get handed down as, this is the only recipe for fruitcake we're allowed to make at Christmas. And it becomes rigid. And that's kind of the thing that I like about witchcraft, is that I'm still like those great grandparents still kind of going, oh, I'm going to throw a bit of this in. Oh, I'll throw some herbs in a working. Right. What else do I want? I'll use some elements. So I use some fire because I work with fire a lot, and I'll chuck some water in because, they work well together. And then it'll be like, oh, and I might draw a sigil, and then I might add in like a rune, and I might add something else. And I'm going to basically power all these different ingredients in. And the way that I look at it is like, some of them are going to work. Like some of them are going to work. Some of them might not. Some of them might have random events that you can't quite foresee. And I've had that shit happen over the years. But I like that element of kind of going, what is my knowledge base? What do I feel like throwing into this working? What feels right for me right now? So that's the eclectic bit. And that to me sounds very similar to what you do. Except I guess I'm lazy, so I don't come up with my own theological pantheon and my own theological system every time I want to do a working. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'll just use this off the shelf, God. I'll just use Hecate. She's common at the moment. She's ever so popular. I'll just use her. It's fine. I won't come up with my own one.
Well, you could see as Hecate as like, you could go into the three witches from Discworld, You could always kind of...
Oh, there's all sorts of theories about that. Again, there's loads of theories about that, which again, no doubt we'll talk into. We'll talk about in various episodes. But that's like the eclectic part. And then for me, the other part that's really important to my terms of reference, if you like, for my craft is the Hedge Witchery part. Now, for me, Hedge Witchery isn't kind of how it's sold these days. If you buy a book and it's called like Journey of the Hedge Witch or Life of a Hedge Witch, it's talking about, hi, I live in a cottage and here I go to the local farm and I traipse down and move Mr. Hedgehog out the way and I take the little, and it's all very twee and it's all very like, oh, we go and dig up the roots in the hedgerow and we pick our crops and we do. And for me, that's kind of like, that's the watered down version of what it actually is. And the reason that the witches lived on the outskirts of cities wasn't because that's where the hedges were. It's because nobody wanted them in the cities. They were cast out. Nobody wanted. If you were going to the little old lady like that you identified as a witch because she had the potion that you needed because you couldn't get it up and satisfy your missus, you didn't want that person living 3 doors down and gossiping. You wanted it to be somebody out in the sticks. You know what I mean? If you were going bald and you wanted to hide it, you wanted an ointment to put on, you didn't want to be going around your neighbors and going, oh, I see this is made of horsehair. You know what I mean? That wasn't what you wanted. So that's why they lived out in the sticks, because nobody wanted them around. And it wasn't like oh, I'm living near the hedgerow to stay close to the land. Of course they all stay close to the land because that's all there bloody well was. There wasn't supermarkets and cinemas and multiplexes. I've gone right on a rant. This is what this podcast is going to be, just us ranting about shit. But you know what I mean? But like Hedge Witchery, like the Hedge Witches were the ones that straddled the boundaries. And it wasn't like just the boundary between this village and they village, like, thine village over there, or the village. It wasn't that. It was about the realms. It was about straddling sort of the lighter and darker elements of magic. It was about straddling kind of life and death and illness and health and hexes and, I'm going to throw a curse on someone and I'm going to do a spell to make the cattle like fall over dead, but I'm also going to do one to save the neighbor's kids or whatever it is. And it's that whole element of being liminal, which is now one of my favorite words. And liminal is just the space between. And so for me, when I describe myself as a hedge witch, it really is with all of that history coming through. It isn't just like I go along the hedges and I pick up some conkers that are falling off the ground and which is, don't get me wrong. If people follow that path, that sort of fluffier path, and you and I go back long enough to know when Fluffy was that was a major thing. Fluffy it was quite an insult. It was almost like a derogatory. It was almost like an F word. It was like, you can't, don't say that. Don't say that word. That fluffier path, that lighter path, for me has eroded some of the actual meaning and the mystery of Hedge Witchery, because it is, it is a path where for each individual witch to follow and to decide what feels right for them, and where their own boundaries of ethics and morals come into play, and whether that corresponds with the law of the land or the actual law, or what other people would do. And for me, that's a really big part of my practice. So yeah, rant over. I knew instantly. I was like, oh, this is really bugging me. I really want to talk about it. So yeah, but I guess there you are, everybody. That is an intro into kind of our paths. We'll see you next week. Bye bye. No,
No, I get what you
so
mean, because you know, there's things about chaos magic like online where people assume, oh, it's left hand path. It's also, oh, it's very lazy because, you know, it's all about knocking out a sigil, you know, and it has been kind of co-opted by kind
yeah,
of younger people, let's say, who think that they can draw a sigil on a bit of toast and eat it, and that's it, you know.
that's it. Well, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's that it's the simplification of things. It's the same thing as, you know, the idea that, and again, I'm somebody who now sells spell kits, which I like, that blows my mind for a lot of reasons. But like the spell kits that I do, it's broken down in there, why you do it, how you do it, like what you do. There's a video that goes along. It isn't just a, you know, put this herb in this herb, put this in a bundle, and there you are, that's your spell, which a lot of it is. And this is where, like, social media is great, and social media is an amazing tool for the craft, and it really has it, you know, it's opened up access to so many different parts of the craft for so many of us. But it's also kind of created this thing where, you know, if you want to do a working, it's very simple. You just go and add a bit of basil and add a little one of these particular crystals, and you kind of mash them together a little bit, and then you say this rhyme, and that's it. There's no intention there. There's no kind of thinking about what it is you're doing, why you are doing a spell. Should you even be doing a spell for this purpose, like, or working for this purpose? You know, should you be tackling this in a mundane way before a magical? You know, which way round do you want to do? But also, it absolutely beggars belief that very rarely do I see people talking about, and how do you undo it if it goes wrong? You know, what happens if you get an unexpected result? What happens if you do this working and then things go like very rapidly out of control, and things start happening that you hadn't planned because you've literally followed this thing and you haven't put all of that pre-thought into it? And, you know, I've had things go wrong. I've had experiences in the past, and no doubt we'll talk about them as this podcast goes on. And I've had things that have been very surprising and not comfortable, that I've had to get myself out of, and other people out of. So yeah, I think, you know, social media is great, but as you say, like with chaos magic, I see when you can see a TikTok that is 30 seconds long with somebody telling you how to draw a sigil and how to use it, it's like, I'm sorry, I've been in the craft for 25 years. I still don't know what I'm doing with sigils. I can use them in a very limited way, and how I use them is part of a working, and I design them very specifically for a very specific intent, and that's it. And they're charged, and they're normally part of a spell bottle or a spell jar, and that's like my sole use, because it's such a massive field, it's such a wide area. And then you go on TikTok and it's like, sigil for this, and there you go, it's done.
Yeah,
And you're
I
like,
mean, it's all about. I mean, anyone can do magic, but you have to really hone the intent behind it. And I mean, a big thing in chaos magic is all about gnosis and entering the no mind. And okay, you might get some magic that work, you know, knock out a sigil on a piece of toast, whatever. But it's all about honing that that gnosis, and you know, you can spend years doing it, and that's going to be probably what's going to get you more bigger, more powerful results. And you know, it's all about intent, like you said. I mean, talking about backfiring stuff, the big thing with chaos magic is it monkeys paws a lot. So you kind of get people who are kind of playing about with it loosely. But you know, it took me. I mean, I've been doing chaos magic since mid 2000s, and I still fuck it up. You know, just because there's always something you have not thought about. You can get really, really detailed, and you know, and there'll be something. But yeah, it just seems to be a thing with chaos magic where you got to be careful with it, because it can it can be very cheeky. So But yeah.
But it's fine. It's fine, Neil, because as long as you write the words "and it harm none," then you're fine. That you don't need to. There's no other responsibility. Just write that down on the bottom of your working. Like do your whole like 3-day working, which you're doing constantly for 3 days, energizing, and then just in case you just go "and it harm none," just at the end. It's fine. Sorry, that's throwing shade. I know, right? But it's, you know, that's the sort of thing that really annoys me, because again, it's this idea that you go and let it be for the good of all. That's great. But if you've just done this huge, like hexing, cursing, nasty working that is going like you literally, you're designed to attack someone, you're going on the offensive, and then you throw in a, you know, let it harm none and let it be for the good of all, then it's like, but that doesn't release you from any responsibility for the working. Like, I'm sorry, if you've trained an attack dog and you've spent 5 years training this attack dog that on the command it's going to go for somebody's neck, you don't go on Tyson, kill, and then but only if they're a bad person, as the dog's already leaping for you. You know what I mean? You don't, it's I find it all very strange.
Yeah.
So then you brought up gnosis, so let's talk about that a little bit. Just like,
Okay.
so what is gnosis, as in from a, because it's a very chaos magic word, isn't it? It's not something that's used in a lot of other areas of the craft.
Okay. I mean, because we were talking about this, you know, the way that I do sigils is very different from yours, kind of. But
Yeah.
sigils, you know, are created in general, you know, and then they're launched. But with chaos magic, it's about, oh, we're going to get really deep now. It's about entering a state of gnosis because, well, Austin Osman Spare is kind of like the granddad of chaos magic, who was kind of around in the early 1900s. And he had this theory that it's the subconscious mind that is capable of doing magic, and you have to find a way to access that. So, for instance, you can do gnosis, you can spend many years learning how to induce it in yourself, or you can do things like, you kind of get the idea of what gnosis and no mind is by when you do lots of exercise, you push yourself, and you just fucking collapse. Or say you dance all night and you want to throw up, or you'd orgasm, you know, and there's that kind of, it's all about that kind of state of mind where things are just a release and relief, but you've kind of got a state of, there's nothing in your head. So it's about getting to that point where that's when you launch the sigil, because then you're kind of giving it to your unconscious mind to work out. So yeah, that's gnosis really.
For people that might like me, I look for the patterns between the various bits of different paths that I understand. So a lot of Tibetan and sort of the culture around the monks, they have this element of an altered state of consciousness and actually getting to the point where they kind of exist in gnosis. In other paths, I've heard it called an alpha state, which can be induced with like shortcuts, which never work the way that people think. And again, if you're going to be messing around with magic, like taking a load of shrooms and drinking a load of whiskey, it will get you to an altered state of consciousness. Whether it's the right altered state of consciousness, who can say? But there's all sorts of different sort of ways of interpreting it. But for me, it's that thing of the chaos magicians that I've ever known and worked with have been like, this isn't a quick fix. This isn't something that is like, oh, I'm going to do this for 6 months, study this for 6 months. Like, you'll never hear somebody say, or you'll never hear a genuine chaos magician say, you know, I've been studying for 3 months. Look what I know. Look how advanced I am. It's like, yeah, right, bullshit. 3 months, come back in 25 years. And we might have a discussion about kind of, you know, getting past the initial stages of things, because it is kind of like a lifelong journey, isn't it, for a lot of chaos magicians?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've kind of mentioned to you recently that I was in the Illuminates of Thanateros for quite a while. And that is like, you get given the work to get up to the next level, where you have to do something every single day. You have to work on, you know, attaining gnosis, and you have to do it every day, you know, for longer periods of time, you know, kind of build yourself up to maybe spend an hour in gnosis. I mean, I don't think I ever, you know, achieved that. But there's some people who will, stay with the IoT for years, and they'll just keep building and building and building. So it is uh, an evolving skill. It's you don't just get to a certain point and you go like, oh, I'm good enough. I think just in general in magic, you keep going, you keep trying to evolve. So
yeah, I think that's totally true of most of the parts as well. I know, again, like with myself, like our histories are so different but so similar in the fact that we both kind of stepped away from magical practices for a while, and then kind of it came calling. I don't feel like I'm ever gonna be all knowledgeable, like, because there's always something more to learn. There's always different areas. Like, I'm learning more and more about so many different areas, and as you learn about this one thing, you go, oh, that's really interesting, and then that leads you down a whole new path. So then you start learning about that, and then it comes back to something else, and then so there's all these kind of, it's almost like a multiverse thing where it is like every time something happens, it leads to new branches and new branches. So I don't think you can ever stop learning and stop growing in your craft. And this is one of the things for baby witches and for people new to the craft. Like, don't think that this is going to be something in a year's time you're going to go boom and there's a ball of flames in your hand, because it ain't going to happen. Would you like to see me do something that I can do which will actually create fire in the palm of my hand? Do you want me to show you it? Because like, this is something that 20 odd years ago we were talking about back in the days of the shop, and it was something that I finally actually conquered how to do it. And look, fire in the palm of my hand, literally fire. Look, wow, magic.
That's magic. That's magic.
But the thing is, it's like if this had been 300 years ago, people would have gone, burn the witch, burn the witch. I mean, people still say that to me now. But the idea that you can ever get to those sort of points in your witchcraft is like, oh, I've learned everything you need to learn now. Really? Have you thought about this? And then you go, oh no, it's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
So but for me, for my journey, it's something which I find fascinating. It's why I now have a series of books of shadows, because trying to put everything in one book is impossible for me. I just like, I want to know about herbs, but I also want to know about sigils, and I also want to know about egregores, and I also want to know about runes, and I also want to know about sacred geometry, and I also want to know about druidic orders, and there's tell me everything, because the more I learn, the more I can pull various bits of everything together for my own individual practice. So this idea that we're ever going to reach kind of that zenith point of being the ultimate witch, it's never going to happen. Sorry, nobody watching this, there is no such thing as the supreme. We all just have to keep learning, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, chaos in it, but always playing with stuff, always evolving, always finding more exciting ways to launch sigils, and thinking about egregores and different belief systems. And it's almost like an ongoing art project for me, is all these kind of techniques, and there's some there's some that I'm learning now that I've learned recently, and I'm like, well, why didn't I think about it before? And it's just always,
that is, you've literally just blown my mind slightly. It is like, when people go to an art gallery and they go, you see, as you can see here, this is Monet's blue period. I don't think Monet ever had a blue period, but or you go like, this is so and so, this is when they went from cubist to impressionist. And you see like painters and artists that have been around forever, they have these different phases where their style changes and adapts. And it's because they go, oh, I've done this haystack or these poplars in Monet's case, and I've painted them, for the last 25 years, and actually I want to paint something else now, or I want to get a roller and just roll it and then just go, what does that happen? What does that look like? What can I, let's flick some paint, and go down the whole Jackson. Not that Monet was ever, doing a Jackson Pollock, but you see with a lot of artists, they go down those roads. And the same with musical artists, they do like the first album's a pop album, and by the time they get to album 4, it's a heavy metal covers album or something bizarre. And you find that they go on these journeys because it is about creativity. And what you just said has just literally drawn that parallel, because that is exactly what I've done in my practice. It kind of does meander through different things with the odd tangent where I get, I go sidetracked over here, and then I go so into something that I have to dig myself out of 6 months later, because I'm like, why was I learning about this again? Forgotten. But that's just the way that my brain works. Like, we've talked a little bit about your chaos magician and kind of a bit more actually than I was expecting about what chaos magic is. That's really fascinating to me. So would you ever learn something like Wicca, which has got very defined rules and is kind of very, very different to how, in my mind, chaos magic works?
Well, with chaos magic, you shouldn't be snobby. You should try everything. You should try at least once. So, I might some point go down like a Wiccan current, get all the books by unnamed, and
Unnamed, yeah.
follow them. Absolutely perfect. And you don't know. I could just be like, whoa, this works. And then after a bit, I might be like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm not doing this.
I mean, I think it would be really interesting. I mean, I'm poo-pooing it, but there's a certain part of me that I still follow a lot of that Wiccan or that Wiccan base. I don't celebrate every Sabbat naturally. It is something that I'm doing more for the channel. And as I'm making more and more witchy content, some of the Sabbats that I wouldn't normally, because normally for me it's summer solstice, winter solstice, obviously Samhain, and pretty much Beltane, and that's kind of it. Like the cross quarters and all the rest of it, like Mebon, they've never really been something that's hit home. Until in recent years, when I started going to the pagan camp at Lammas, Lunasada, I get so many people get so irate if I call it Lammas. It's because I struggle with saying Lunasa. I struggle with it anyway. So like I find it really interesting that I've started to appreciate some elements of the practice of Wicca, not the written stuff from the 70s, but like how people practice it now. Because there's a certain element of, we said earlier about Jungian archetypes, and there is a certain element there which says, if somebody now believes that the idea of the Wiccan god and goddess, that is the pinnacle, and there is this whole like bunch of energy from all these different Wiccans and magicians putting all of that energy into these particular versions of the god and the goddess, then that has energy, that has power. A bit like Terry Pratchett talks about in Small Gods, where when people stop believing in the gods, they lose their powers. And again, there's a whole like correlation here with Hecate at the moment, because everybody seems to be talking about their relationship with Hecate, and it's something that for me, we'll talk about it in a future episode, but it's something which I've begun to develop because I've been called by her, or by that sort of thought form, that kind of that archetypal energy is calling to me, and my brain is understanding and kind of filtering it through this filter of Hecate. But again, that thought form, that archetype, or that energy could have been called many different things over like millennia, and so that's given me this whole different viewpoint in looking back at some of the sort of Wiccan stuff, and to start appreciating it in a slightly more adult way than just poo-pooing it. But to me, that feels quite similar to what you were saying about like finding the magic within whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, like I truly do believe in these archetypes are the same energy that's just kind of changed form throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's rebranding. Actually, what I was going to say is that there's a famous chaos magician who's a comic writer, Grant Morrison, and he wrote a whole book about that called Super Gods, which you might be interested in.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's all about how these archetypes have existed throughout time and how they've ended up being comic book heroes like
Mm-hmm.
Batman, Superman. But it is a very, very interesting book. I think it would really appeal to you that, yeah, comic book
Absolutely.
heroes are the new gods. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, give it that. People start digging up all these ancient things
Mm-hmm.
about, okay,
Could you
X-Men,
imagine how many
Spider-Man.
plastic action figures they're going to find?
Because people put so much belief and so much strength and so much devotion into these icons,
Mm-hmm.
why can't they be kind of real on a subconscious level as well?
Well, To a large extent, they are, because they are drawing on that archetypal heroic imagery. You know, like look at Marvel. Marvel has such a connection with like the Norse pantheon, like Thor and that whole thing. Like Loki and Thor at the moment arguably are two of the biggest Marvel characters because of the films, because of the Avengers, and they have brought so much of the Norse mythology to a wider audience. But the wider audience is now just like, oh yeah, Loki, that's Tom Hiddleston. And you're like, no, it really isn't. I mean, it is. And this time round, that's what he looks like. But then again, it's, you know, to my mind, it's like everything borrows from everything that's come before it. You know, like there's arguments around horror films, which I know is something that you and I both love, and how horror films, like the archetypal villains and the bad guys in the horror films, are elements of stories about demons and stories about ghosts and, you know, monsters that have been around for millennia, about things that we've not understood, whether that's about our darker desires in ourselves, or whether that's about, you know, actual physical things that are running out in the woods, and we don't know and understand what it is. We don't have the science to understand, actually this is just, you know, this is a bear, this isn't a big cat, or this is whatever it is. And then we go, oh, I know, that's a yeti. Is it? Could just be a bear. Like, no, it's a human. It's yeah. And so for me, like, when you look at, I mean, this episode has gone everywhere. I mean, bearing in mind, everybody, like, this is literally what these episodes are going to be like, where we start off and then we just go on a tangent. Yeah, it's a really good example of what this is going to turn into. I know, right? But it's that thing of, like, there is a reason that these stories have been around for millennia, and every generation rewrites the stories to suit them. And you can see this. And as cultural norms change, as we adapt as a society to various things, certain things get left out. So like all of the Disney films, like the Disneyfication of the Grimm's fairy tales. Oh my God. I totally recommend anybody. I mean, to be fair, anybody watching this probably knows about the Grimm fairy tales and things, because if you are just a Disney person, you probably wouldn't be watching this podcast, let's be honest. But if you like, go and watch a Disney film and then go and have a bit of research as to the stuff that was left out from the original fables, because they are dark. Like Hansel and Gretel do not survive the witch. You know what I mean? Like, this is cannibalism. This is like, they do not survive in the original stories. They get gobbled up horrifically. And, you know, the witch is fat for the winter. That's what happens in the original stories. And yet, you know, our version of it is, oh no, and then the house is now suddenly made out of gingerbread and everything's lovely. Really? No. You know what I mean? So like, there are so many elements where each generation brings its own stuff. And I think for me, magic is exactly the same as that, you know, and the things that we hold, the things that hold power. Why is this particular symbol, you know, a symbol of power and this one isn't? Well,
yeah,
because we say this one is and this one isn't. I've gone on such a tangent, but I totally kind of get how, from a chaos magic perspective, like all of those things make sense, because they make sense to me.
There's I mean, one of my favorite books is American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and that goes on about the old gods have been forgotten, that people don't believe them anymore, so they kind of resign themselves to mundane jobs and things like that, and they've just lost their power. Whereas there's the new gods of technology and, you know, that kind of thing, surveillance, and it is kind of, it plays on this idea that we do have new gods that we bow to and worship and are afraid of, you know. And it, you know, it's, that book's all about, you know, the old gods trying to get back strength, and also the old gods finding interesting ways to creep into the you know, subconsciousness once again. So yeah, you're right that there is new shit. Yeah.
It's similar to the analogy I used earlier about cooking. It's like our tastes change as we develop, as you know, throughout our own individual lifetimes, our tastes will change. So the thing that you thought as a kid, you were like, oh my God, this is my favorite dinner ever, I can never imagine not eating this. As an adult, you're like, the hell was that? And you know, like when I was younger, the olives, the smell of olives was enough to turn my stomach to the point of heaving. These days, you know, if it wasn't for Slimming World, give me a jar of olives and I'm quite happy sitting. Love them, and things change. And I guess like again, magic has different flavors at different times, and it's kind of where I think, you know, this idea of you can only be a particular type of witch, that's great for now. Like fine, if you want to define yourself as a sea witch, fine, you want to be a sea witch, be a sea witch, if that works for you. But you are limiting yourself to this time and this moment and that definition of what a sea witch is. And again, to bring this discussion full circle, like to me, that is so tiny. That is such a little drop compared to the massive wealth that the craft brings us. And just to say that you are, you know, I'm a sea witch or I'm a crystal witch, great, fantastic. But what about herbs? What about bones? What about, you know, other energies? What about all this other stuff that you can do that is similar but very different?
Yeah, I think, I mean, kind of, I think everyone kind of wants a label just to kind of define themselves, I think, in general. But it kind of does, with witchcraft, you know, for instance, you know, you're kind of keeping yourself in that box. And say if you started, if you're a sea witch or crystal witch or whatever, and then you start getting interested in herbs or something, you're like, oh no, that's not me. That, you know, I can't do that. Or you'd feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm into herbs. Now I'm a herb witch. You know, it doesn't have to be that way at all. It's like, you know, if you're a witch, if you're practicing magic, you should have your fingers in all the pies for a bit sometimes. You know, you've got to feel other shit out before you can be like, I am definitely this and I'm not moving. So, but I think me and you have kind of evolved, come from different kind of paths over the years to the point where we have got a label in chaos, eclectic, but it's a very loose label anyway. So
Absolutely. I think that's also one of the things where, you know, because we are a bit older and because we have been practicing for quite a few years, it kind of gets you to the point where, you know, those little labels don't matter. You know, all the bits that come before witch, to a large extent, they don't matter because for most people, they're not going to hear all of that anyway. They're just going to hear witch or, you know, magical practitioner, whatever it is. That's what they're going to hear. They're not going to understand the nuances of all of the rest of that. But as you say, I think that we could probably both go through a list of labels that we could have given ourselves 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and how those labels have adapted. I'm not going to suggest we do it, but you know what I mean? Because I think like we do evolve, we do grow, and I think for me that is the wonder of witchcraft. You know, it is why things are, it's why I open every video as welcome my wonderful weirdlings, because like being a weirdling, being a student of the weird, being a, you know, somebody who studies the craft, that to me, that is amazing, and that is such an open field for all of us to kind of go down and find what sparks joy, and find the bits in us that we go, oh, you know, I never really connected with, I don't know, Pluto, but actually I'm really connecting with Bast. And you're like, okay, fine. Like, that doesn't mean you have to go from one pantheon and just then follow an Egyptian pantheon. Like, if a connection to that particular deity works, then great. Or it may be, you know, that you go, oh, as you said, I've only ever worked with herbs because that's what I was taught, but I would love to learn tarot. But do it. You don't have to just, you know, you don't have to just be one thing. And that is something that I do find, you know, is a lot lacking these days. So as you can see from this first pilot episode, these podcasts are going to be a little bit meandering, but they are kind of exactly the type of conversations that me and Neel would have in real life, as we go, oh, that's really cool because that makes sense to me because of Neil Gaiman that did this and then that was in this video. So that is kind of what these are going to be like to a large extent. We are going to have some guests on in future episodes. We are going to invite other people. We've got a whole range of things that we want to talk about. But if there is anything that you want to talk about, you can put it down in the comment section and leave us your thoughts and feelings. And if there's something that you think, what are your opinions about this? We can share that within reason. I mean, you know, there are boundaries on this, so we're not going to talk about everything, but we're quite happy sharing a lot about our lives, aren't we?
Yeah, it's just nice to have a chat between us, and also, you know, it might be quite comfy to listen to by a witch who's maybe up and coming, or like has been in for a while, and they're just like, you know, like the idea of just having some things to think about and maybe look into, and you know, but we like
Well,
to keep it
kind
nice and chatty,
Yeah,
because
because
that's
the
how it
idea
should
is
be.
like me and Neil are in person, right? And we're sat in a coffee shop, probably Borders in Leeds back in the day, but we're sat in a coffee shop, like having a coffee, looking at some books, having this weird and wonderful conversation that is literally going everywhere. And you're just on the table just next to us, and you're just kind of listening in, and you're just going, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, that's interesting." But still able to kind of get your two penneth in through the chat section just down there. So just to wrap this up, I do have to say that Neil, as well as being an amazing friend, is actually an amazing creator. So I'm going to click a little button here, which I think is this one. There we go. In fact, you know what? I'll do it like that. I'll pop us down in the corner. So this is Neil's Etsy shop. For those of you that haven't been initiated to the Necronomicon, fanzine, Neil, do you want to briefly just tell people what it's about? Because the way that I would describe it is like every 80s horror movie that you ever wanted to rent but weren't brave enough to is reviewed in this scene. But how would you describe it?
I mean, that's basically it, really. But no, it's mainly 70s, 80s horror films, the ones that I've kind of grown up watching, or always wanted to rent out and never got to as a kid. And it's just me casually reviewing each one, not in a film critic way, just in a, you know, kind of doing a lot of anecdotes about, you know, childhood and what's been going on. And I'm just trying to convince you to seek out these very obscure films to watch. But, you know, there's some classic stuff in there, and sometimes I do issues where it's new stuff as well, just so I can let you know what, this isn't worth watching, or this is all right, you know.
Yeah, like
So,
don't bother with Nightmare on Elm Street the remake. Just go and watch Robert Englund. I think the way you described it is absolutely spot on, because there is an element where you'll be like, I watched this video and it was absolutely amazing, and this film is really cool. And actually, I remember when I was watching it, because I was like 9 and I was eating pizza, and I remember that. And so your review is literally like, this is a really cool film, but actually it was really cool because I got pizza this one because it was actually a Sunday and I was poorly and I wasn't able to go on a school trip and blah, 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 blah. And there's a whole backstory to it. And as you read it, that's what you want, because it literally puts us in your mind, in your headspace back in the day. So yeah, if you haven't already, do please go and check out Necroneel on Etsy. Get yourself some Necronomicons. I absolutely love it. I think it's a fantastic zine. And I know you're blushing right now. You're so embarrassed. You didn't know I was going to do this, but you're so embarrassed. But like, do go and check it out, because everybody that I've recommended that's picked up a copy is absolutely falling in love with it. So there we go. Anyway, that is it from today's podcast. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Do go and check out, as I say, Necroneel over on Etsy. And of course, if you've liked this video, please give it a massive thumbs up. That really helps us out with YouTube's algorithm. And if you haven't already, why haven't you? Please hit the subscribe button and then click your bell icon and change your notifications to all. That way YouTube should notify you each and every time we upload a video. Just to let you know as well, in future, this will also be coming to you via SoundCloud. Is it something like that Neil does? I don't know anything about how to turn this into an audio thing. So Neil's going to sort all of that out for future episodes. So that is it from us. Stay weird.
stay chaotic.
And we'll see you next time.